You know how people describe those moments that change everything? Those flashes of lightning that split your life into a clean before and after? They always make it sound so beautiful, so enlightening. Well, mine didn't happen on a mountaintop or in a lover's arms. It happened in a sterile, beige cardiologist's office, under the hum of fluorescent lights, with news that took the neat, orderly world I had built and turned it completely upside down. And honestly, what I did next probably makes me sound like a monster. Maybe I am. But you have to understand. When a man in a white coat tells you that your own heart is betraying you, that the very muscle keeping you alive is growing weaker and larger every second, and that you have 5 years left if you're lucky, the rules suddenly stop feeling real. All those unspoken vows about being a good wife, a devoted mother, they dissolve into background noise. My name is Alara. I'm 31. And this is the story of how a death sentence forced me to realize I had been living someone else's life for far too long. Before the world went sideways, I had what anyone would call a perfect life. Garrett and I had been married for 4 years. We had our son Rowan, a whirlwind of energy, at 2 years old. We lived in a cookie-cutter house in a subdivision, where every lawn was manicured and every mailbox was identical. It was a life painted in shades of beige and taupe, safe, predictable, and soul-crushingly boring. Garrett worked construction, a job that stole him from our bed before dawn and returned him after dusk, covered in a film of dust, smelling of sawdust and exhaustion. He was a good man, a solid man. He paid the bills. He didn't cheat or raise his voice. He was the kind of man a woman is supposed to want. I worked part-time at a boutique downtown, mostly for an excuse to wear clothes that didn't have baby food on them and to interact with adults who didn't need their diapers changed. Look, I know how that sounds. Terrible, ungrateful. But the truth is, I was suffocating long before the diagnosis. I felt a constant, low-grade panic simmering just beneath the surface of my placid suburban existence. The days bled into one another, in a monotonous loop of laundry, playdates, and episodes of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Garrett, bless his heart, was part of the problem. He was fine. But God, he was boring. His idea of a thrilling evening was ordering a pepperoni pizza and watching whatever game was on ESPN. He'd come home, offer a one-syllable grunt about his day, eat his dinner while scrolling through his phone, and be asleep on the couch by 9, the remote slipping from his hand. Meanwhile, I was 28, feeling like my life had flatlined before it had ever truly begun. I was a wife. I was a mother. But I had completely forgotten how to be Alara. The only flicker of color in my grayscale world was Serena. She was a manager at the boutique, a vibrant, witty woman with a laugh that could fill the entire store. While our coworkers gossiped about reality, television, or complained about their husbands, Serena would ask me about the books I was reading, the places I dreamed of traveling. She saw past the wedding ring and the diaper bag. She saw me. When she'd lightly touch my arm while we were talking, or send me a funny meme late at night, it was a jolt of electricity, a reminder that I was still a person, not just a collection of roles I was playing. Then came the appointment with Dr. Matthews. Dilated cardiomyopathy. The words sounded foreign, clinical. He explained it in simple terms. My heart muscle was thinning, stretching, becoming less efficient. It couldn't be reversed. 5 years, maybe less. I sat there, nodding as he talked about medications and lifestyle changes, but my mind was screaming a single thought. This is it. This quiet, suffocating, beige life is all I get. Garrett tried. I have to give him that. He reacted to my diagnosis the way he reacted to everything, like it was a problem to be solved, a broken pipe that needed fixing. He spent hours on the internet, creating spreadsheets of heart-healthy recipes and researching second opinions from clinics across the country. "We'll beat this, Alara," he'd say, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen, his voice filled with a determined optimism that felt completely alien to me. But watching him frantically Google heart failure treatment options didn't make me feel supported. It made me feel profoundly alone. He was treating my impending death like a project, not like his wife was slowly fading away in front of him. The only person who seemed to understand was Serena. She understood that my terror wasn't just about dying, but about dying without ever having truly lived. She started staying late after our shifts, just to talk. Not about the medical jargon Garrett had that covered with his color-coded binders and appointment reminders, but about the real stuff. The raw, gut-wrenching fear. The seething anger at the cosmic injustice of it all. The feeling of being utterly cheated. Those conversations in the stockroom bled into long walks through the empty parking lot, then into late-night drives with no destination, the city lights blurring past the windows. For the first time in years, I felt someone was paying attention to me, not to the problem I represented. Someone was listening. One night, Serena suggested we get dinner. I said yes without a moment's hesitation, pushing aside the small, nagging voice that reminded me Garrett was expecting me home for Rowan's bedtime routine. That dinner changed everything. We went to a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, a place where no one would know us. For 3 hours, I forgot about beta blockers and echocardiograms. I forgot about being a responsible mother. I forgot about dying. Serena made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't felt in years. She made me feel interesting, beautiful, alive. Then, across the flickering candlelight, she reached out and took my hand. Her thumb gently stroked my knuckles. "I care about you so much, Alara," she said, her voice soft but certain. And in that moment, something inside me, something I didn't even know was broken, clicked back into place. People would say it was a crisis, a desperate reaction to a terminal diagnosis. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. It felt like finally understanding what all those poets and songwriters were talking about. Garrett and I never had that. We didn't have a spark, we had a sensible contract. We got together because it was the right time, because we got along well enough, because our families approved. But with Serena, I felt an intensity, an electrical current that hummed beneath my skin. Later that night, when she kissed me in her car outside the restaurant, it wasn't an experiment. It wasn't a phase. It was like discovering a part of myself I never knew existed. There I was, facing a death sentence, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely, authentically alive. I started making excuses to stay out later, work emergencies, mandatory staff meetings that never happened. Garrett would ask, but in his passive, distracted way, like he was checking off a box on a to-do list, rather than expressing genuine concern. "How was your day, Han?" he'd murmur, his eyes glued to his phone. Meanwhile, Serena was flooding my life with color. She sent me songs that made her think of me. She asked me detailed questions about my childhood, my fears, my wildest dreams. The contrast was a chasm I could no longer ignore. At home, I was a ghost, a supporting character in Garrett's predictable life. With Serena, I was the main character in my own epic story. When was the last time Garrett had made me feel beautiful? When was the last time he had surprised me with anything more thoughtful than a gallon of milk he picked up on the way home? I knew I was being selfish, but a voice in my head kept whispering, "Shouldn't you be? You have a ticking clock inside your chest. 5 years. 4. How many more days are you going to spend pretending?" Serena and I started talking about the future. Our future. She had a way of speaking that made the impossible seem plausible. We'd drive for hours, planning trips to the Italian coast, talking about renting a small apartment together somewhere warm, somewhere beautiful. Even with my diagnosis hanging over us like a storm cloud, she made it feel like we could outrun it. The breaking point, the moment the final crack splintered through the foundation of my old life, came on a Tuesday night. I was feeling particularly weak, the ever-present fatigue weighing on me like a lead blanket. Garrett sat down next to me on the couch, took the remote, and muted the television. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone serious. "I know the timing isn't ideal, with your health situation." He said health situation like my terminal illness was a minor inconvenience, like a scheduling conflict we needed to work around. "But I think we should have another baby. I think Rowan would love a little brother or sister. It would give us something to focus on, something positive." I stared at him, utterly speechless. The air left my lungs. Here I was, my body slowly failing me, my heart falling for someone else, and he wanted to bring another child into this wreckage. It was the ultimate proof that he didn't see me at all. He had no idea who I was, what I was going through, what I wanted. He was trying to patch a gaping wound with a tiny band-aid, to build a new floor on a house whose foundation had already crumbled. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch, his soft snores filling the quiet house, I made my decision. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't spend another day of my precious, limited time pretending to be happy in this suffocating life when real, vibrant happiness was waiting for me just a few miles away. My hands trembled as I wrote the note. I kept it short, cowardly. I told him I'd met someone who made me feel like myself again, that I needed to explore this while I still had time. I didn't have the courage to write Serena's name. I packed a single suitcase while he slept, taking only the essentials. I paused at Rowan's doorway, my heart constricting in my chest. He was a small lump under a dinosaur-patterned comforter, his breathing soft and even. A wave of guilt so powerful it almost knocked me over washed through me. But I pushed it down, whispering a justification to myself. He's young, he'll adjust. It's better for him to have one genuinely happy parent than two who are just going through the motions. It was a lie, but it was the lie I needed to believe to walk out that door. I left the note on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker where he'd see it in the morning. Serena was waiting for me at her apartment, a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and the biggest, most beautiful smile I had ever seen. She took my suitcase and pulled me into a fierce embrace. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her eyes shining. And God, I really was. For the first time I was choosing myself. I was choosing love. I was choosing to live, not just exist. The first few months with Serena were a dream. We found a cute studio apartment downtown with exposed brick walls and a huge window that flooded the space with morning light. I felt like I was finally living the life I was supposed to have, the one I'd read about in books. Everything was new and exciting, waking up next to someone who actually wanted to talk to me, having real conversations over breakfast instead of staring at our phones, making spontaneous plans without worrying about babysitters or nap schedules. Serena introduced me to her world. Her friends were artists, writers, musicians, people who talked about ideas and passions, not mortgages and property taxes. We'd stay up until 3 in the morning, drinking cheap wine and debating philosophy. If Serena felt like driving to the coast on a random Tuesday to watch the sunset, we'd just go. After years of my life being dictated by schedules and obligations, this untethered freedom was intoxicating. My heart condition was still there, a constant, quiet hum in the background, but somehow it felt less terrifying with Serena by my side. She researched alternative therapies and holistic treatments, not in Garrett's panicked, desperate way, but as if we were a team, partners facing a challenge together. On my bad days, when the fatigue was overwhelming, she never made me feel broken or burdensome. She'd order takeout from my favorite Thai place, build a pillow fort on the living room floor, and we'd binge-watch old movies until we fell asleep. Guilt over Rowan would surface sometimes, sharp and sudden like a rogue wave. But I would tell myself it was temporary. Once Serena and I were more settled, I'd figure out a way to have him over, to be a part of his life again. Garrett tried calling a few times in those first weeks. I let every call go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to face his anger, his confusion, his inevitable lectures about responsibility. Serena encouraged me to block his number entirely. "You don't owe him an explanation, Alara," she'd say, wrapping her arms around me. "You gave him 4 years of your life and a child. You've paid your dues. This time is for you," and I believed her. The only real stress was money. My part-time job at the boutique barely covered my half of the rent, and my medical expenses were piling up. But Serena, who had a good job in marketing, never complained. She covered the difference without a second thought. "We're investing in our future together," she'd laugh, kissing my forehead. "The money doesn't matter when you've found your person." And I really thought I had. I thought this was it. This was the love that would see me through to the end. I had traded my safe, beige life for a world of vibrant color, and I had never been happier. I was so blissfully happy, in fact, that I didn't notice when the colors started to fade. It started subtly, around the 4th month. Serena began working later. New projects, urgent deadlines, she'd say. When she did come home, she seemed distracted, her attention tethered to the glowing screen of her phone. The easy, focused presence that had drawn me in was replaced by a restless energy. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. I tried to be supportive, but then I started noticing other things. The way she'd step out onto the balcony to take certain phone calls, the way she'd angle her phone away from me when she was texting. A name, Riley, began to pop up in her conversations. Riley from the office was so funny. Riley really understood Serena's sense of humor. Riley was helping her on the big new project. When I asked if I could meet this person who was clearly becoming important to her, she'd brush it off. "It's better to keep work and personal life separate," she'd say, the irony of that statement hanging thick and heavy in the air between us. I had left Garrett partly because his predictable routine felt like a cage, but now I was feeling a new kind of anxiety, a frantic uncertainty about Serena's secrecy. My health started to decline around the same time. The episodes became more frequent and more severe. There were days I couldn't catch my breath just walking from the bedroom to the kitchen. Chest pains that felt like a vice squeezing my heart sent me to the emergency room twice in 1 month. The first few times, Serena dropped everything to be there, holding my hand, her face a mask of concern. But as the hospital visits became more common, her unmovable work commitments started to coincide with them. She'd promised to come as soon as she could, but would show up hours later, smelling of coffee and looking exhausted. The worst episode happened on a Tuesday evening. I was trying to make pasta when a crushing weight settled on my chest. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. I managed to crawl to my phone and call Serena, sobbing, terrified, begging her to come home. She sighed. She actually sighed. It was a sound of pure exasperation. "Alara, I'm in the middle of a huge presentation," she said, her voice tight. "I'll try to leave early." I ended up calling an ambulance myself. I spent 6 hours in the ER getting tests, being poked and prodded, waiting for results completely, utterly alone. Serena finally appeared around midnight, looking annoyed and repeatedly checking her watch as if she had somewhere more important to be. When the doctor came in to explain that my condition was progressing faster than they'd expected, that my timeline might now be measured in months rather than years, I braced myself for Serena's grief. Instead, she just looked, inconvenienced. The final confrontation happened a week later. I was feeling particularly sick and scared, and I needed her. I needed comfort, reassurance. She came home late again, smelling of wine, and seemed irritated that I was still awake. When I tried to tell her what my doctor had said that afternoon, she barely looked up from her phone. "Who is Riley?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "And don't you dare tell me it's just a work friend." What followed was the most devastating conversation of my life. Riley wasn't just a coworker, they'd been seeing each other for months. Serena claimed she still loved me, but she couldn't handle it. She couldn't handle watching me deteriorate. "I'm too young to tie myself to someone who's dying, Lara," she said, the words coming out in a cold, detached rush. "I have to think about my own future, my own happiness." "I gave up everything for you," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "My marriage, my son, my entire life. I trusted you with my heart when I knew it was literally broken." She just kept shaking her head, tears of self-pity streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she repeated over and over. "But I have to think of myself, too." She was moving in with Riley next week. I had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Just like that, the vibrant, technicolor life we had built together was over. I was left with nothing but a suitcase and a terminal diagnosis. Sitting in that empty apartment after Serena's things were gone, the silence was louder than any argument. I was adrift. I had nowhere to go. My parents lived across the country, and we'd barely spoken since I'd left Garrett. I had pushed away all my old friends. I had no savings. My health was a ticking time bomb. The only person I could think of was the man whose life I had destroyed for a selfish fantasy. I practiced what I would say to Garrett 100 times in my head before I finally found the courage to drive to our old house. It felt smaller than I remembered. The paint on the shutters was a different color. A new, cheerful-looking wreath hung on the door. When Garrett opened it, he didn't react the way I'd expected. He didn't yell, he didn't gloat, he didn't slam the door in my face. He just looked at me, standing there with my pathetic little suitcase, and a deep, profound weariness settled over his features. Then, a small figure peeked around his legs. It was Rowan, my baby. Except he wasn't a baby anymore. He was almost 6, tall and lanky, with Garrett's serious eyes. He stared at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution, like I was a stranger who had appeared on his doorstep. "Daddy, who is that?" he asked in a whisper that shattered what was left of my heart. Garrett put a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. This is Mommy Rowe," he said softly. "Remember?" We looked at the pictures. Pictures. My own son knew me from photographs, because I had been gone so long he'd forgotten my face. I stumbled through an explanation: the breakup with Serena, my worsening condition, having nowhere to go. Garrett listened, his face an unreadable mask. "You can sleep on the couch," he said finally, his voice flat. "Until you figure something out. But that's all this is, Alara. I'm not your husband anymore. And I'm not going to pretend we're a family again." Living there was its own special kind of hell because it forced me to see exactly what I had thrown away: the tired, checked out man I'd left behind was gone. In his place was someone confident, capable, and genuinely happy. He had learned to braid his son's hair, to pack creative school lunches, to handle bedtime stories and monster checks. Rowan adored him, orbiting him like a small moon. In those first few weeks, my son barely acknowledged my existence. When he needed something, he went to his dad. I was an intruder in the life I had abandoned. Then there was Clara. She was a nurse. Of course, Garrett would end up with someone nurturing and practical. She was pretty in an understated, natural way, and she had a calm, steady presence that filled the house. What truly gutted me was watching her with Rowan. She didn't try too hard or act like she was auditioning for the role of stepmom. She just talked to him like he was a real person, helping him with his homework, listening to his long, rambling stories with genuine interest. One afternoon, I watched them at the kitchen table, their heads bent over a math worksheet, and she made him laugh, a loud, joyous sound. I had to retreat to the couch and pretend to watch television, my eyes burning with tears. That was supposed to be my role. That was supposed to be my relationship with my son. But I had given it up, and someone else was filling that space better than I ever had. Garrett began to set firm boundaries that made it clear my presence was temporary. I couldn't just lie around all day wallowing in self-pity. I had to contribute. The local hospital offered me a few hours a week answering phones at a reception desk, but the meager paycheck barely covered the cost of my medications. I felt like a ghost haunting the family I'd destroyed. Garrett would drive me to my medical appointments, an act of basic human decency, but he would wait in the car, scrolling on his phone, instead of coming in with me like he used to. The final blow, the one that extinguished the last ember of hope I didn't even know I was still clinging to, came one evening when I overheard him talking to Clara in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep on the couch, but their quiet voices carried. "I want to give Rowan the stability he deserves," Garrett was saying. His voice had a warmth and excitement I hadn't heard in years, maybe ever. "He's been through enough upheaval. He needs to know that the people in his life aren't going anywhere." The implication was a blade in my gut. I was the upheaval. I was the instability. I was the person who goes away. Clara was the one who stayed, the one who could be counted on, the one who put Rowan's needs first. They talked about their future, about maybe having more kids one day, about the life they were building together. As my health continued to decline and the episodes became more frequent, I started to understand that this arrangement wasn't temporary anymore. I wasn't going to get better and find my own place and rebuild my life. I was dying, slowly and ungracefully, on the couch of the man I had betrayed. The doctors had stopped talking about treatment options and started talking about comfort care. My heart was failing faster than anyone had predicted. I was tired all the time, perpetually short of breath, utterly dependent on Garrett's charity for everything. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Serena and Riley had gotten engaged and were planning a wedding. The woman who claimed she couldn't handle watching me deteriorate was apparently thriving, living the life we had once planned together with someone newer, healthier. The cruelest irony was that in these final months, I finally understood what real love looked like. It wasn't the fireworks and intoxicating passion I had chased with Serena. It was here, in this house. It was in the patient, steady, reliable love Garrett was giving to Clara and Rowan every single day. The love I had dismissed as boring was actually the foundation of everything meaningful. The love I thought was so liberating had evaporated the moment it became inconvenient. I had traded something real and lasting for something that felt exciting but ultimately meant nothing. I had given up a man who would have cared for me through anything for a woman who abandoned me the moment I needed her most. I had left a son who loved me unconditionally for a relationship built on fantasy and self-deception. Now, as I spend my final days on a couch where I don't belong, I often watch through the window. I see Garrett teaching Rowan how to ride a bike, his new two-wheeler wobbling down the sidewalk. I see Clara on the porch, cheering them on, her face bright with love. They look so happy, they look so complete, and I can't escape the truth. I didn't leave my family for love. I left them for selfishness, for the illusion of passion, for the childish fantasy that I deserved something more exciting than what I had. The most painful part isn't that I'm dying alone, it's that I can see with perfect, horrifying clarity how much happier everyone is without me. Garrett is a better father. Rowan has the stability he needs, and Clara gets to love them both without the toxicity I brought to everything I touched. I made my choice, and now I am living and dying with the consequences. There's no one left to blame, no one left to fool, and nowhere left to run. This is what I deserve, and we all know it.